And traffic is always a good excuse in Bangkok, at least. Before we get to the... my name is Nirmal Ghosh. I'm Indochina Bureau Chief of the Straits Times and President of the FCCT. And before we get to the program this evening, I'll just run you through a couple of upcoming programs. We have our Contemporary World film series going strong. We have 2 films by award-winning female Asian directors living in the West. One is Deepa Mehta, who lives in Canada, and her film Earth is being screened on the 19th of April. And then we have, on April 25th, we have the Pakistani director living in New York, and her film is called Dukhtar, or Daughter. The director is Afia Nathaniel. These 2 films are both award-winning films, and they explore very, very raw and deep and raw issues in South Asia. Then we have, let me see. Yeah, on June the 1st, we have the Governor of the Bank of Thailand. And on June the 22nd, we have a panel discussion on Buddhism and politics. Both are definitely a must. You should put them in the calendars. And I should add that if any of you are not members, you can easily become members of the FCCT. You don't have to be a journalist. You don't have to be a foreigner. If Thais can become members, and there are various categories. Even students can also become members at quite a reasonable rate. So coming to this evening's program. Future on the Farm. I'm not sure how many, I'm sure some of you have come here because you're interested, so you have spent time on farms. Recently, in the last 1 year or so, I've been spending time on an organic farm. And the amount of chemicals and pesticides that are used in the surrounding farms is absolutely staggering. We have Marut Jatiket here from the Field Alliance NGO, who will be speaking a little bit about that. We also have deep systemic problems in Thailand's agricultural sector. The average age of farmers is older and older. Villages are populated with old people and very small kids. And there's also a shift from smallholder farming to large contract farming. In fact, one of the fallouts of that is the haze, because corn farming has expanded to feed the animal feed industry. One can go on and on about this, but today we have real experts over here. We will start with Dr. Nippon Papongsakon from the TDRI, a distinguished fellow and former president of the TDRI, previously Dean of Thammasat University's Faculty of Economics. Dr. Nippon has been a go-to person for agriculture issues for many of us journalists, and he's authored over 160 research articles and publications related to labor economics, human resources, agriculture, livestock policy, and so on and so forth. Kun Marut is the director of the Thai Education Foundation and the Field Alliance. Kun Marut has worked in the States and has worked as a teacher back in Thailand, and has spent the last few years putting together these policy and implementing sustainable agricultural practices. And of course we have Kun Kon Chatikvanij, who is a former finance minister with a varied background as well. And his, over the last, I think, 1 or 2 years, Kun Kon has been specializing in agricultural economics and issues in the agriculture sector. And we were pleasantly surprised, in fact, some months ago to get nice little packages of organic rice from Kun Kon. So maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that this evening. But we'll start with Dr. Nippon. Oh, I could, if you, all 3 of you could come up, please. And we'll start with Dr. Nippon, if you could open the panel, and then we'll move on to Kun Marut, and we'll end up with Kun Kon, and then we'll have a conversation with the audience. Thank you. Kun Marut, your slide is up. Do you... Have you got the right presentation in there? Yeah, okay.
Oh, sorry. Good evening. Thank you, Nirmal. Let me go very quick because I have about 22, 23 slides. So I have to go very quick. My topic of discussion, I'm going to discuss the current agricultural malaise, which is not the first malaise we experience, but I believe this time it is different from the previous ones, previous problems. And then why is agricultural development in Thailand successful and resilient? And every time it experiences a shock, then it revives again. Then what are the critical challenges, both internal and external challenges facing Thai agriculture today? And is there a future for Thai agriculture rather than the future on farm? It's difficult to talk about future on farm. Okay, because I'm not the farmers like you. Okay, so what kind of agricultural transformation? First, the agricultural malaise in the past, in 1980s and 1990s, Thai agriculture experienced very serious trouble. We have declining comparative advantage. We have the problem with macroeconomic adjustment to recover from fiscal imprudence during the late 1970s because of political instability in late 1970s. Then it's the end of the forest land frontier. The forest land used to be the major source of agricultural growth in 1960 and 1970s. Then the Dutch disease in the early 1970s caused by, as a result, agricultural experience the cost price squeeze. The Dutch disease was caused by the opening of the liberalization of the financial sector, as you know, cause, and it is the main cause of economic crisis in 1997, 1998. And then academics at the time claims that agriculture was a sunset industry, and yet it was not. It revived back. Then the second malaise was the El Nino induced drought right after the 1998 economic crisis. And then it's compounded by the food export problems, chemical residues in our export of chicken, export of shrimp in 2000. Then bird flu problem in 2004. And everything, those are the problems we experience. Yet Thai agriculture has managed to revive. And Thailand is still the major exporters of food and agricultural products, to name a few: rice, cassava, rubber, sugar, shrimp, before the EMS disease, then chicken, fruits. Then growth rate is satisfactory, particularly when a commodity price boom in 2000. And share of agricultural GDP as a result remain more or less at around 9 to 11% of total GDP. But the current malaise affecting Thai agriculture may be different. I'll talk about this later. Okay. Now, why agricultural development successful? In the past, Thai agriculture has always been exposed to the world market without much distortions, very minimal government intervention which affect prices of input and output. That's very important. That's key. That's the key of Thai agriculture. And farmers, processors, traders have been used to adjust and used to adapt to new global environment. This is very important. They get used to this. They adjust every time there are shocks. They adjust to the new shocks. Okay, and we have prudent, thanks to previous government. We have prudential macroeconomic policy which maintain price stability. Very important. We have public investment in rural infrastructure which help reducing cost of production for farmers. Then Thai government used to spend adequate amount on agricultural research and development, and also giving a lot of scholarship for students to study agriculture abroad. So it increased productivity. The success of Bank for Agriculture and Agricultural Cooperatives (BAAC) provide cheap credit for probably at the moment 90% of farm households have access to cheap credit. While if you go to Southeast Asian countries in other ASEAN countries, they don't have such luxuries. Okay, the public-private move to establish the new food safety laws and organizations in order to monitor food export, and as a result, we have been able to increase export of safe food. These are lists of the policy that help the success of Thai agriculture. But now we have challenges, and this time the challenges is much more serious and maybe different from the past problems. The challenges are very complex and take a long time. You will see it will take a long time to tackle. And then other Asian countries are now actively adopting policy to strengthen their agriculture using market-oriented policy, like Thailand have been using since we have been using the market-oriented policy long time ago, 100 years ago. You can say that. Now there are 5 internal problems affecting Thai agriculture. The first one is we have too large share of agricultural workers, and most of them rapidly aging old farmers, and then most of them also are casual farmers, mobile phone farmers, and part-time farmers. Okay, you can see that even though share of value-added agricultural share of value-added of GDP declined to let's say 10% from 30% in the past to 30-35% to 10%, but share of employment declined very slow, and now the share of employment in agriculture remains at around close to 40%. Most of them are part-time workers. Okay. So farm income as a share of household income is very low. Only 12% of total households income. Okay. Why? Because household members, most of household members have jobs outside agriculture and then send money home. And then most old farmers are casual mobile phone farmers working part-time and receiving transfer from their children who work outside agriculture. So that's why you have 12%, only 10%, 12%, 90% of rural households derive their income from non-agriculture, outside agriculture. This is the key. Okay. And in the next 10 years, there will be at least 5 million farmers retiring. You can see the structure of age structure of farmers, rapidly aging. And on the left-hand side is the average age of all farmers. You can see the average age of all farmers increasing very rapidly. Okay, and these are the farmers aged 60 years old and over. You see, at the moment it's more than 2.5% already. Okay. The second problem is the high income disparity between agriculture and non-agriculture, and this is causing serious political pressure for every government to provide price support for the farmers. You see, if you calculate the per capita GDP in agriculture vs non-agriculture, average agricultural per capita income is only 10 to 20%. In latest year, it's about 20% of income in non-agriculture. But since I mentioned that most farmers work part-time, if you calculate their income in terms of full-time on the right-hand side, the difference decline. The difference decline, and yet you can see that farmers, let's say the latest year, farmers' income, per capita income received something like full-time worker, 263. This is in terms of, I think, I forgot the unit, but comparing to 421. Okay, so the gap decline, and yet substantial gap, income disparity. Okay. Now the third problem is structural change. This is very important. Structural change, which means mass migration from rural to urban, absorbing young people from rural area into urban area and industrial sector. That is structural change, and that source of structural change, which used to be a major source of agricultural growth, now no more. You see the green part, no more. This is the line here is agricultural growth of GDP, and these are the contribution. The green one is structural change, no more, because after 2004, workers stopped moving from agricultural sector into industry and services. And why? Because average earnings outside agriculture comparing to agriculture decline. So it's no longer profitable to work outside agriculture for people in Thailand, for population in Thailand. So we stop. And in fact, you see a reverse in trend. People begin to go back to agriculture. If you can't do work outside agriculture, you go back to agriculture. Agriculture is always a safety net for Thai people. The fourth one is distorted agricultural support, price support, and credit support policy. And these may have stalled the structural change and resulted in an increase in agricultural employment after 2004. You see, this is the trend of agricultural employment. It's been declining and then now remain relatively constant. And then the annual rate of new jobs begin to increase. It used to decline, the blue one. Now it's increased. So it may be because of the distorted, since 2002, 2003, world price of agricultural product increased. And then after 2009, government, 2000, in fact, beginning with Kun Thaksin, they begin to subsidize agriculture. Therefore, it's very good to go back to farm, for two reasons. As a result, farmers get trapped by the subsidy program, by subsidy policy. And you count all those subsidy policy, besides the paddy pledging policy. Paddy pledging policy for 2.5 years, 5 cropping season, spent almost 1 trillion baht. The total outlay, almost 1 trillion baht. Now, if you don't count that, you look at other programs affecting that government spend in agriculture. Credit 1.2 trillion baht per year. Credit is the largest item. Every government, including this government, when they come to government and then when they have a new policy, they will have subsidized credit policy. Every government, without exception, and that's why we, our Thai households, have very high household debt. The household debt to income, according to Bank of Thailand, on the average is about 80 to 84% of income. But for farmers, farm households, the household debt is 87%. And the poorer you are, the higher the debt, the poorest income, the poorest two-day size, poorest 20%. They have something like more than 124% of their, the debt account for 24% of their total household income. And most of the debt is not from informal sector. It is from formal sector, from government policy. That's dangerous. And then you look at the expense for other policy like irrigation, 37 billion baht. Okay, agricultural research, 7.4 billion baht. So you counting out the money, no money for productivity enhancing. You are using most of the budget for credit, subsidized credit and price support policy. Okay. Land reform, the government already gave away almost 35 million lives or 20% of agricultural lands to 2.6 million farmers, and yet you can't stop reforestation. You see, because you are giving away free land. Everybody wants to have free land. Okay. Now the last problem is public research in agriculture decline. In the past, we used to be very good. Look at here, 0.9% of expense of we spend about 0.9% of agricultural GDP on research and development. It's very good. But after 1994, keep on declining, and the yellow one is China. You see, that's a problem. And then we don't have good researchers in agriculture. Not to mention agricultural students. No one wants to study agriculture because it's better to follow Kun Gon, study finance and become rich, and then later on become part-time farmer. Once you become rich.
That's true.
Okay. Now those are internal factors. External factor is even more serious. This is following the concept by Richard Dobbs Mackenzie Institute. Okay, they mentioned 4 disruptive forces. I add one more: the climate change. The first one is rapid urbanization in emerging countries, and as a result, you have a rise of middle class in China. Imagine a rise of when India grow 7 to 8% for the next 5 or 10 years, then you will have a large number of middle class in India again. So what happened? There will be an impact on demand for food and diet change, a lot of change. Okay. Secondly, you have aging society. You have both aging population and aging farmers. For aging population, they need safe food. They need healthy food. Okay. For aging farmers, you have labor shortage. Then you have abundance of land because nobody farm. Okay. Then you have technological change, which is the most important thing. I'm going to explain this later. Then you have new varieties, drought tolerant, flood tolerant, every kind of things. And you have climate change, high temperature, extreme weather events, drought and floods. Therefore, you need to have drought tolerant varieties, things like that. And then globalization. Now you have social and environmental concern. You produce food. Food has to be what? Food has to be no water, a very small water footprint, carbon footprint, IUU, human trafficking, all these kind of social concern. You don't fishing too much. You don't overfishing, things like this. These are the kind of things. Now technology. We are now experiencing the new agricultural S-curve, the second green revolution. second green revolution because of the advancement in biotechnology, particularly genomics. Thousands of animals and plants, scientists have mapped their genes, Okay, so we are experiencing this curve, And as a result, companies, particularly MNCs and emerging countries, many emerging countries, start investing heavily in research. And even MNC themselves, they know that today they can't go it alone. They can't do research alone. They have to form alliance. So they form Crop Life in Singapore, you know that. Crop Life is the alliance of 8 big MNCs. Because they know that each company is highly specialized in one area, one field. It's not enough, not good enough. They have to have a synergy by having an alliance with other companies. Okay. And yet, it's not enough. They have to form associate. There are also 3 associate companies, and they have to work with national associations in agriculture. So this is a new form of alliance in the world now. Okay. And they have plenty of money. They have a lot of knowledge to do research. Okay. And money is not the problem. See, on the right hand side, you see name of the companies who are doing this kind of research worldwide. And yet Thai government give very little attention to R&D. Okay. Tariffs now, because of globalization, tariffs is on the decline, but NTB is on the rise. You know that. And now, because of the supermarket around the world, there are not only international standards imposed by FAO, by Codex, but now there are many more private standards. If you want to sell to supermarket, you have to comply with those standards. If you don't, you can't sell. These are the challenges. Okay. Is there a future on the farm? Very little on the farm. Yes, I want to be optimistic. Thai agriculture has some strength. What is our strength? Abundant land. Comparing with other Asian countries, comparing to Japan, Taiwan, even India, per capita land in Thailand is very high, except Malaysia. Okay. It's high, also high in Myanmar, but useless because land are occupied by military people. Okay. The second strength is that except the government support policy, the markets in Thailand are minimally distorted, allowing farmers, traders to make decisions based on the relative prices in the world market. This is the key. Very important because it means resource allocation is very efficient in Thailand. Reasonably good logistic and sound financial system. And as a result, we have lower logistic costs than our neighboring countries. And then Thai exporters now sell rice not on the LC. You don't the buyer don't issue LC. The buyer just borrow money from Thai exporter, because Thai exporter have access to cheap credit because of the liberalization of financial sector. The diversity is very important in agriculture. In real estate, location is the most important. Location. But in agriculture, diversity is the most important issue. And diversity of farm types, you have different farm types in Thailand. You have different cultural practice. You have diversification, which help lessening the vulnerability of farmers to shock. These are the key. Okay. And many pioneers, we have a large number of pioneers as well as guru farmers, large and small. We have now emergence of young and educated part-time farmers who are keen in production, not only in production technology, but also in marketing. The new crops, new generation of farmers are different from old generation of farmers. Okay. Then we have highly competitive agribusiness companies. You can mention a few of them in Thailand. Okay. Now there are 3 crucial policies for the future of Thai agriculture. What are they? First, you have to move people out of agriculture. And for aging for all farmers, you must have social policy. Secondly, you have to boost agricultural growth. And thirdly, transforming Thai agriculture. These are very important. First, a need for new development policy to move large number of workers out of agriculture. Yeah, we need a new rural development strategy to generate higher paid jobs outside agriculture. You go back to agriculture, you remain poor, not enough income, no future. There will be, I'll talk about that, there will be future for some professional farmers, not for smallholders anymore. Very difficult. With smaller share of agricultural workforce, it is fiscally feasible to provide income subsidy for the poor and for all farmers. That's very important, and become less politically sensitive. So this is very important. A need for a fine-tuned rural social policy. And central government cannot do this kind of things when you talk about policy for aging for all farmers. But luckily there are now a number of local governments, they provide old age care centers that enhance the quality of life for all people. This is very important because these people, these old farmers, they are not living with their children anymore. They are staying with their grandchildren. The skip generation family, skip generation household. You go to northeast Thailand, 11% of the households in northeast Thailand are skip generation household. Old people living with children, young children, and then this is a reproduction of poverty because all farmers are uneducated. How can they teach their children to educate? Because their parents are working in the city. This is very, very crucial policy at the moment. So the second policy is to accelerate agricultural growth. I'm not going to go into details, but there are lots of things we have to do. You have to shift more resources from subsidy policy to productivity enhancing policy. That's very important. Easier said than done. When you become minister, I hope you do this again, or prime minister. Okay. Land consolidation policy, revising agricultural tenants law, land bank law, foreclosure law. Foreclosure law is important because if now most of farmers are aging rapidly, and then if you want them to sell land, anybody who doesn't have enough money, they have to borrow money from the bank. If you borrow money from the bank and buying land, interest rate is very high. If you borrow money to buy car, interest rate is 2%, 1 to 2% per year, because you borrow it on leasing. And the foreclosure is very easy. Foreclosure is very easy. For land, foreclosure take at least 10 years. So you have to revise this foreclosure procedure. Otherwise, interest rate is too high. Therefore, if its interest rate is too high, it's very difficult for middle income people who don't have a large amount of asset, of cash to buy. They can't borrow to buy. So that's very important for consolidation, land consolidation. Because we want to encourage the so-called farm family. Farm family, the size of farm family has to be similar to size of farm family in Europe and in England, particularly in German. 200 hectares, 300 hectares, something like 2 to 300 hectares. That is possible in the next 10 years. With that kind of farm size, there will be economy of scale. The productivity will increase, particularly labor productivity will increase. Now, so land consolidation policy. Water management, we need new institutional design to tackle the weakness of the existing water management under both normal conditions and emergency situation. I'm going to talk about this in the on this Saturday to the group of journalists, Thai journalists on this issue. This is we have been doing at TDI, doing research in the last 3 years on these issues. Now, investment in agricultural innovation, we need a new form of public-private joint program, joint research together. Then finally, the third policy is a clear long-term strategy to facilitate agricultural transformation. We need to transform our agriculture into modern agriculture again. The objective is to enhance both labor productivity through large farm families of farmer groups, working together to reduce their cost of production, or as well as to increase land productivity, both labor productivity and land productivity. But labor productivity is the key because Thailand has abundant land. So our first priority is on labor productivity. Then improving quality and value-added niche products. Then, very important, 3S, product standards, safety, and social concern. These are the type of new agriculture we have. If you want to sell in the world market, you have to comply with those 3S. Okay. And conservation of agricultural resources. Very few research, very few study on this particular issue. And strategy to accomplish those objectives, market-driven strategy is still very important. And complementing the market in case of market failure and redefining government roles. Now, what kind of transformation? Oops, sorry. Now, those are the kinds of transformation we need, because of those 5 disruptive forces. Then you have to identify the type of transformation necessary for Thai agriculture. Let's say in case of rapid urbanization, rise of middle class, you have to have new production process, new products, functional food, these kind of things. Then you must have larger farm size, you must have effective cooperatives or producer association or producer companies like in India. Now they have large producer companies. You must have new organization for smallholders in some product in order to participate in the market, the so-called, what the economists call non-market coordination. And then you must have new private standard labels of products. Cross-border investment, redefining the role of the government, resource conservation, as well as a bunch of new laws. You need new laws on several things in order to meet the requirement. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thank you. Okay, so now I think, Kunmarut, are you going to switch over to the computer? Or do you have a presentation? We'll drill down into the issue of
you can come here.
Rising productivity, but based on what? On more chemical input? I think Kunmarut will be exploring that issue.
Thank you, Normal. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here, my first time, and always glad to listen to Dr. Nippon, who's always have a very analytical view of macro level of Thailand, and being honored to be here with Kun as well. I'm just adding a little bit of my work to the presentation that Dr. Nippon has already brought up a lot of issues about younger generation, pesticide issues, and this is part of our work that we've been doing in Thailand and in the region during these past 10 years, which is on a pesticide. These figures is kind of old, but it's still giving us a picture of how Thailand is using the pesticides in agriculture, steadily increased, and this last few years has also almost doubled the figures. So it is not that we are spraying less, we are spraying, well, not spraying more, but where does it go? Farmers are spraying it, and we also exporting. I think we are seeing a lot of pesticides from Thailand in Cambodia, in Laos, in Vietnam. So part of that are going out to countries, but mainly it's inside Thailand. Okay, the business is getting bigger, and recently I was in a meeting with the National Committee on Chemical Management, and the private sectors, corporations, have planned to multiply the outputs of chemicals in Thailand, especially in agriculture. They're seeing a need that Thailand could become a hub of agriculture, chemical agriculture. And here's the why. When we talk about how much farmers are using the pesticide, we can't really talk about Thailand. I mean, we have to look at our neighboring country as well. If you look at Thailand, at the average of pesticide use per liter per year in this area, about 1,200 hectares, over about 1.3, 1.4 million liters of pesticide being sprayed, or average at about 4,700 liter per person per year, or average at 10 days per person. The figure may be a little bit confusing, but just think of it. If you're in a village and you have 100 farmers spraying at 4,000 liters times 100, so in one day, those pesticides are just, the wind blowing it back and forth in the communities. So the impact is really high on the environment and the health of the communities. Now, this past year that we have been tracking the amount of pesticide used by farmers in the region, one surprising country that's coming up really quickly during these past 3 or 4 years is Laos. In 2007, there's only a few liters per person that Laos are using because farmers are very poor. But now, our recent figure, this is last year figure in Kham district of Sieng Khong, the Laos farmer have surpassed Thai's Cambodian, which considered to be the highest sprayers in this region. Now, why is that? A lot of that had to do with they learning it from the Thai brothers, how to use the spray and all those things. But the other thing is a lot of contract farming is coming from China, and they are coming with the pesticide, the chemicals, okay? So a lot of areas in Laos now are spraying like crazy. Okay? Now, why do I bring this up? I mean, Thailand can make a move, but it won't help. I mean, we have to look at us as regional now, because whatever Thailand does is impact the neighbor. If we ban something, it shows up in Cambodian market, shows up in Laos market. And we also all the corporations in Thailand, food corporations, also have contract farmings in Laos, in Myanmar, in Cambodia. And we are buying the produce back to our market. So if whatever we do is always coming back to Thailand, because as Dr. Nippon said, we are the world leaders of food exporters. So these are the problems that are facing the farmers today. They spend a lot of money, as Dr. Nippon said, they are in debt. A couple of weeks ago, we were in Laos and we interviewed them. How much do farmers pay there for each spray? 2,000 to 3,000 baht for one spray. And the vegetable sprayer in Vientiane, they spray up to 30 times a crop. Just think about that, all those numbers. Yeah? So these are the facts that the farmers are facing, and they don't make money and they don't really do a lot of accounting. So when they sell the produce, they give the money back to the seller who sell the seeds and the chemical, and get a new batch. So it's just keep rolling on and on. Here is another pictures of what are being used. In Thailand, in rice farming, mostly used the herbicide, but what we're seeing here is the banned pesticide in all the countries are being used. Banned by each of the countries. Like Thailand has banned the metamil, dichlorophos, endosulfan. All of these still available in shops, though they don't advertise it. But if you ask for it, you get it. In Laos, paraquat was banned recently, but look at the number of farmers that used it. Everybody's using it, more than any other countries. In Cambodia, they also banned a couple of insecticides and rodenticides, but quite a few farmers still use the 1A and 1B, which is highly hazardous. I mean, if you drink it, farmers use that for commit suicide. It's very dangerous. The cocktail mixing. As we've seen a lot of cost of labor, as Dr. Nippon said, there's no workers. So each spray time, they mix more than one pesticide or two pesticides in order to make it potent and also to reduce the labor cost for spraying. So here, Thailand usually mix two or three kinds of pesticide. A few that go up to 4 or 5 types of pesticide together. But again, if you look at Laos or Laos, the data is not available up there. Only the 2 types that were collected. But Vietnam, Cambodia, they're right there. They mix 3, 4 times, sometimes 5 or 7 times pesticide sprayed at once. So the impacts to the health of the farmers is really bad, because it's multiply the effects from the pesticide to the health and the environment. Now, where did the pesticide goes? I borrowed this slide from our colleagues from Biotech. Biotech do their annual study of residues in fruits and vegetables each year, and they announce that. And last year, number 1 is citrus, orange. About 8 or 9 kinds of pesticide inside the orange. I stopped drinking orange juice for a while. And guava, apple, strawberry, the Chinese small orange, and the famous watermelon, all contaminated, full of pesticide. So be careful what you eat. Now, this data, I think, is very good to give it to public, especially the consumer. We are part of the network with the biotechnology, and they present this data each year. And 5 years ago, when they presented, the government, oh no, it's not true. The supermarket, they check all the supermarket, all the label in the supermarket. Everybody said, no, the lab testing is wrong. But they're verifying everything is in accordance to the standard. But what happened is this past 3 years, we see the decline of residues in vegetables and fruits in the supermarket. Just like that. Yeah? Which is good. Now, every time they make announcement, you'll see all the supermarkets are there. Wanted to see which one has the lowest. Yeah? So this is a good move for pushing consumer and the big corporation to start making less residues or have a more regulated farming, that they are working with farmers. This is another, it's entire list of vegetables that has the residues, pesticide residue that's over the maximum residue limited. And the red color, the number one vegetable that has the most residue, grapao, pat grapao. The basil. Who would have thought, why would spray a basil? It's a highly smelled plant that we eat on the street every day. But it has the highest residues. They spraying it a lot because it's, the market driven, needed. And the string beans, very popular som tam. Okay? Farmers are spraying a lot of it, and it's still contaminated, residue inside. Yeah? So these are the top 10 that they check that has the residue, but the one in red that has over the maximum residue level. Yeah? The Chinese kale, the eggplant is there, the canna, the kale, I think, yeah. Now, this is our work. Is the lunch safe for children in the school? We don't think so. Because if we look at the data a while ago, so this is last month picture, we had our school in our project do the kids doing the residue testing using the test kit in 3 provinces, in Chiang Mai, Cha Cheong Chau, and in Phang Nga provinces. This is what we found. We did 21 schools. This data from 21 schools. 8 schools are unsafe. Yeah? 13 are unsafe. No, sorry.
One or the other.
Yeah. No. 8 schools are unsafe. Yeah. 13 are safe. Yeah. Just wrong typing. But even 8 schools, that's a lot of kids that has to eat their contaminated vegetable. Yeah? And these are the vegetables that they found was contaminated. The school lunch. Yeah. We're going to have a meeting with the Deputy Permanent Secretary later on about this. Yeah. We're also doing a blood test to check the residue in the body. Yeah? This is just a simple pinch in the fingers using receptive paper, and it's only detect the organophosphates and carbamate, which is only 2 types of pesticide that were detected. And we found that more than half of the kids, if you look at the 2 columns, the risky and not safe, have shown up here. That is about nearly 50%. Yes. This is Thai rural children.
What is the age group?
Excuse me?
What is the age group?
Primary level, yes. We're going to test more, but this is just, we just did a rapid test just to see what the status, and we're going to talk to the FDA and the ministry to further expand these studies. And this is not good for kids, because the impact to children development is really big. I mean, the effects to the brain, the effects to the nervous system, everything. So these are the problem of pesticide issues for Thailand. So what are the challenge? What do we do? Easy one. Just ban the highly hazardous pesticide, the SSP. Well, at least if you banned it, farmers have no choice but to stop. I mean, if they're enforcing the rules, not to sell that. And we have enough technologies in Thailand for farmers to not using it, because there are organic farmings everywhere. Well, at least 1 or 2%, but there are technology and there are knowledge there. They can do without. And another problem that we have is we don't have existing national chemical agencies. Like Vietnam now already established the Vietnachem, which is the national chemical agencies that oversee every register of chemicals in the country, both agriculture, industrials. Thailand doesn't have that. It's spread all over 5 or 6 ministries, and everyone is doing their own thing. And another problem of our laws is that we only require to register the hazardous chemical that was listed in the banned list. But those that are not banned or hazardous, you don't have to have registered. So there are 40,000 chemicals in Thailand are not registered because they're not considered to be under the list. Okay, so we need to change this law. We need to change that every chemical that sells in the market, not only pesticide, have to be registered and undergo the risk assessment testing. License and regulate the shop sellers. You can buy the pesticide everywhere in Thailand. In Laos, they're selling it with the Coca-Cola, and everything's in the shop. These are the things that has to improve in Thailand and in the region, because kids are selling the pesticide in many countries. And the worst thing is that the pesticides in Laos are in Thai language, in Vietnamese language, in Chinese. They cannot read them. The same problem is in Cambodia. So it's just a mess. We need a better enforcement and increasing fine for the shop seller that's selling the highly banned pesticide, and promote the build capacity on organic and agroecology practices so that farmers will stop and use less pesticide. We also need some measures to protect our community and schools. As I showed you the data up there, that they are spraying over millions of pesticide, even if diluted pesticide, the mixed with water, but it still has the impacts to health. It has impacts to the frog, the fish, all the biodiversity in the field is there. Okay? We need a law, we need a measure to protect the school. Like many other countries in Europe, Japan, they have that law. We don't have that. And the one that, the same problem that Dr. Nippon has mentioned, that there's no young generations get into agriculture. We had 40 agriculture colleges in 40 provinces of Thailand. There are less than 10,000 students that are enrolled in agriculture. They enroll in other programs. So we have less and less future farming generations coming in the education system. And we have been working with this school We have been working with non-formal education and the school in some provinces that we can, and also try to work with the ministry to help promoting this. But the problem still increase. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's definitely a wake-up call. Kun Korn, we'll move on to you now, and maybe you can give us the benefit of your
Okay.
new incarnation.
Thank you, Namo. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasure always to be back here. Perhaps I should start by just setting the record straight, just in case any of you are wondering. I have not become a professional farmer. I still call myself a politician, but clearly, obviously, an inactive one. But I am very bullish on the agricultural sector, and not least because of my limited experience being involved with farmers over the past couple of years. I have really actually become more bullish about the agricultural sector's prospects. Now today it was very great honor to have be able to listen to the two experts, Dr. Nipon and Kun Marut. They both raised some critical issues for us to consider at a policy level. But before I get into that, I'd like just to spend a few minutes telling you about what I've been doing in relations to farming over the past couple of years. Basically, it all started really partly as an accident. I came across a group of farmers from a small village called Nong Hin village in Mahasarakam, which is in the northeast. Very poor village, not irrigated, so they could only farm once a year, depending entirely on the use of rainwater. They came to me with a problem. It's a common problem. Put simply, they're losing money in their main occupation, which is rice farming. The more they farm, the more they're finding themselves indebted, and they want to see whether there was a different approach to whatever it was that they were doing. So I packed my bags and went and visited to talk to them, find out how they've been doing things. And I can see that this was a typical northeastern rice farming village. It has all the characteristics that both Kun Marut and Dr. Nipon talked about. They were old. The average age of the farmers in this village probably more than 50. Of course, the national statistics is telling on this. I mean, 20 years ago, the average age of a Thai farmer was 30-something. 20 years later, it's now 50-something. And that's exactly, I think, testimony to what Kun Marut was saying. There are no new farmers. So basically, these are all old farmers getting older. And as Dr. Nipon pointed out in one of his charts, a number of them will be retiring, not because they're reaching retirement age, but simply because they're no longer physically capable of continuing with the hard task of rice farming. So that was what I found. They had this demographic disadvantage. They had a disadvantage in terms of access to all the key resources, water, of course, funding, of course, markets, huge problem. So we decided that we should focus on the one big advantage that they did have, which was that they grew some of the best rice in the country. And by being the best rice in the country, that pretty much means one of the best tasting rice in the world. Except their problem was that they weren't being properly paid for it. And therefore we felt that this was something that we could help them with. So we agreed that they should immediately, not weaning off, but immediately cease the use of all kinds of chemicals. In fact, when we first met them, one of the village heads, just prior to our visit, dropped dead in the middle of the rice field while actually spraying his farm with pesticides. It was clear that he's overreached his limit on toxin, and this was a wake-up call for the rest of the villagers. But really, the main motivation for them agreeing to give it up was financial. It was just costing them more than they were earning, and at the same time, their crop prices was getting lower and lower, and this was no longer working out. So we agreed that they would stop using pesticides and also chemical fertilizers and go back towards their organic roots. They were concerned. They wanted to do this, but they were concerned about market, whether they would actually be yielding less rice as a result of not using chemical fertilizer, and whether they would be able to achieve higher price that would compensate for that. So we entered into a contract with them. So essentially, this was a contract farming, whereby we knew that we would be able to, if we market this rice properly, retail the rice at a price that could comfortably allow us to pay them what turned out to be 23,000 baht per ton of rice. We've achieved that price for 2 years running now for the farmers. To put that into context, this year, the market price for their rice was 9,000. So 23,000 against what they would normally be achieving, which is 9,000 baht per ton of paddy. In order to do that, we were selling the rice milled in packages like this, which is vacuum sealed and wrapped in the bag that I'll talk about in a second. Branded IM, which is, for those of you who know Thai, is to be full, and with all the traceability and data that the modern premium consumer requires, which is identity of the farmer, the specific satellite location of the farms, and so on and so forth. So basically, we branded the rice, properly packaged it, and then tried to introduce it directly to the end consumer. And by doing it this way, we were able to sell a pack like this. It's still being sold in Tops and Villa supermarkets countrywide at 120 baht per kilo. Against, it's not the most expensive rice on the premium shelf. It's not the cheapest either, but it's a price that consumers are willing to accept, consumers at the premium end, that is. And as I said, a price that translates to a healthy price per ton of paddy for the farmers, one that allows them to be profitable without the need for government subsidy. In doing this, I learned a few things. 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago now, when I was appointed the chair of policy at my political party, the Democrat Party, I remember one day Kunabisit asking me to prepare, to give an opinion, not immediately, but eventually give an opinion on what our position should be on the issue of GMO. Interestingly, of course, this became an issue in this current government when the cabinet at first tried to approve a GMO law. When he first asked me the question, I had no idea what our position should be. I can tell you now that I'm a convinced opponent of GMO, not least because from an economic perspective, my small involvement with this village, and I'm now into the third crop with them, third season, and it has expanded from the original group of just 10 farming families now to about 60 families, covering about 600 rai of paddy. So we can grow almost without limit. The only limitation being really my time and also our ability to access a broader market. But on the GMO issue, from a macro perspective, the trend that I'm seeing that Dr. Nimpon talked about, that is critical to me being bullish on the Thai agricultural sector, is the increasing and accelerating pace of urbanization within Asia, the growth of the middle class, and of course, other than in Thailand, the continuing growth of the Asian global and particularly Asian population. So the World Bank estimates that the global population will go from 7 billion to about 9 billion. Most of that increase over the next 25 years or so will be in Asia. Most of the new cities that are likely to emerge over the next 20 years will be in Asia. Most of that, of course, will be in China. Now, of course, with urbanization comes changing consumer pattern, and of course, increase in spending power. It's already being manifested in the rise in number of tourism. 6 years ago, we had barely 1 million visitors from China. This year, 8 million. Last year, 8 million. This year, we're already expecting 10 million coming to Thailand. That's a direct result of urbanization and the growth of the middle class in that particular country. The same impact is already happening in foods. And I think one of our problems is we continue to look at this as agriculture rather than looking at it as the manufacturing or production of foods. Sometimes I wish actually that the Ministry of Agriculture should actually change its name and call itself the Ministry of Foods. And it's a subtle difference, but it's a critical one. Because the villagers in this particular village, up to 3 years ago, their job ends on harvest day. Literally, they would harvest their rice, lay it out to dry for a couple of days, and then they'll hire a truck, and the truck driver will take them to the nearest miller. Not even a mill of their choice. They have no knowledge of market price. There is no competition in terms of price setting for their rice. The price that they paid to rent this truck is prohibitive to the extent whereby once their rice is at the mill, they have no choice but to sell it at the given price. They are complete price taker, and especially in the past 2 seasons, the price that has been offered has not covered their costs. They have never, in living memory, thought of the end consumer, the person who actually eats the rice that they grow, as the customer, and really, that is the problem. So the work that we've been doing with them over the past couple of years has been the reintroduction of the concept that there is an end customer who will sit down for lunch or dinner with the family and eat their rice and want to know, in fact, how this rice is grown, where it's grown, and by whom. And if you can communicate this information with that end consumer, the end consumer will pay you a higher price. And that's really all that we've been doing. I think it's translatable to other products. And I think Thailand almost uniquely in a unique position to offer the global consumer this quality premium product. Whenever I talk about this with the Rice Exporter Association and so on and so forth, they sort of pat me on the back and say, yeah, very nice, but it's very small scale. And of course, right now it is small scale. In fact, I look at the NESDB data out of entire agricultural land that we have. today only 0.2% is organic. So if you look at this room all the way back to the entrance door, and imagine that this is agricultural land in Thailand. Basically, it's the area of the seat I'm sitting on that today is organic. Now we produce 20 million tons, roughly, of milled rice a year. We eat half of that, we export another half. The 10 million that we export is about 1/7 of the total rice that is traded in the world each year. I don't think it's too much to ask. If we can aim to ensure that all the rice we export is organic, because I don't think it's too much to ask that the global consumer, sooner rather than later, at least 1/7 of them will be wanting to buy organic rice. And if we can make sure that all the organic rice that is bought in the world is grown in Thailand, then our farmers can be earning a proper living and living in a healthier environment. So when you look at the numbers in that way, it is not impossible. But of course, a lot of hard work is required. And when I talk about this, and I look at the gentleman in front of me drinking his wine, cheers to you. It's beer for me today. And this is one good thing about not having to talk about finance and politics. I can talk to you about important things in life and drink beer. The example I give to my Thai friends is that I in any given room, especially in Bangkok, I can challenge those in the room that they can name me more types of wine than they can name me different types of rice. No doubt. And the fact that you would go into any typical restaurant in Bangkok and you'd be given 2 different menus as a part of the course, one for the food, one for the wine. You know, you choose your red and your white, you choose your year, and you pay a huge variety of prices for those different wines. But when it comes to the Thai ordering a plate of rice, he has no clue. In fact, he makes no demands. All he wants is just a plate of rice. No demand on the quality of rice. But the fact is, and Dr. Nipon and Kumaru will probably correct me on this, but I have heard that there's 10,000 different kinds of rice just in Thailand alone. They keep them all in some warehouse at the Ministry of Agriculture. And of course, each tastes differently, different qualities, and so on and so forth. But we are clueless, and we are meant to be. We pride ourselves on rice being, a solid part of our national culture. So there's a lot of work to be done in actually not just working with the farmers, but more importantly, perhaps, in making sure that there is a market for these premium agricultural products that we want Thailand and Thai farmers to be growing. There's a lot of work to be done in creating this market. But the French didn't do it overnight either. The first wine, I understand, was Bordeaux. That was sort of marketed specifically as a Bordeaux for the first time in, I think, 1855. It took them quite a few years before wine became an established product, premium product, the way it is around the world. But now people have done it with coffee. They've done it with all different kinds of products. And in fact, when my friends tell me that 120 baht is expensive for a kilo of rice, I always throw it back to them that it costs less than a cup of Frappuccino that they buy every day at Starbucks. And I reckon this is actually worth more in every which way you want to look at it. So the way I see it, the global macroeconomic trends towards people paying more attention to the impact of chemicals and pesticides, people paying more attention to the quality of foods they put on the table, especially for their kids, the increasing spending power that allows them to make this kind of choices. Well, this plays straight into our hands, luckily, because one of the many challenges that I faced was the truism that Dr. Nippon talked about, and that is Thai farms are small, especially in the Northeast and in the North. The typical farmer has maybe 20, 30 rice. It's small. It lacks economy of scale. But turn it another way, and you have the artisan farmer, and who needs to learn to work together better through a cooperative. But being small can be turned to an advantage in this modern consumer age, and I think that's what we need to do. The lack of resource, the increasingly difficulty in accessing water is making it even more relevant for us to turn premium rather than to focus on mass industrial scale production. And I think the market potential is there, and that is why I'm optimistic. And I actually see food production, agriculture and food production as one of the bright spots for Thailand for the next several decades to come. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Con.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's nice to wind up on that optimistic note. There's a mic out there, standing mic out there. So if you have questions, please go up to the mic and feel free. And please state your name and affiliation, if any, for the record, and keep your question short and precise. Remember that all this entire panel discussion is going to go up on YouTube, so you are on TV. Go ahead.
Peter Jansen, Nikkei Asian Review, I guess, tonight. Huh? Hey, Dr. Nippon, maybe you can follow up on what Kun Korn has just said about the size of farms, because I think there's always been a debate in Thailand about shouldn't Thai farms be getting bigger and more mechanized and moving towards maybe American or European style sort of larger farms. And you mentioned a little bit about this, about the foreclosure law and whatnot. I mean, is this the way forward for Thai farms, is to become larger? Because Kun Korn is suggesting that maybe the future is more premium produce rather than larger size farms. And why hasn't it's never happened, right? In the last 30, 40 years, you don't see Thai farms really getting bigger. Why not? Yeah.
Please go ahead. No, you can go ahead now.
Hello. Okay. There are two different ways to go about this kind of things, because what you need is to increase level productivity of farm income. One way for the mass market is land consolidation, and that you need a larger farm, unescapable, because as young people do not farm, so they will sooner or later will have to sell the land. As a result, you need to, and if you go still, in the next 10 years, Thailand is still producing a large amount of rice, 30 million tons of paddy, on the average. Therefore, large amount of that will still be produced by the mass market, not the organic. So going towards the organic is much more difficult. Therefore, the land consolidation in that aspect is important. But the other alternatives in the short term or in medium term, where old farmers and the middle-aged farmers are still farming and they are smallholders, forming the groups is very important for them to produce, not only the kind of niche market products, but by the way, niche market, if everybody goes for the niche, it's no longer the niche. It has to be small. For organic, it's different, but I'm not going to comment on this issue at the moment. But The other way is to produce high value products. You have to aim for specific kind of high value products. So in that case, marketing is the key. And you need someone like Kunkorn to be a manager. But you need a commercial manager for this thing to happen in a larger scale. You can't, if you depend on NGOs, on CSOs, civil society organization people, they will be very limited. But if there is a business model for people to become a manager of the farm and become, you can make money from organizing farmers together, then that's the choice. India now has the producer company, but it's again the successfulness of the producer companies are limited only to certain type of product like dairy products, high value of vegetables. That is possible, but for rice very difficult. If you go for organic rice, you have to work very hard, particularly for export market. I know a large number of associations, and as well as private companies. One large private company, the Capital Rice, the largest exporting Thai company, one of his son, promoting this kind of organic jasmine rice, but the scale is still very limited. And then what happened if the head of the group, you see a large number of groups with with very active managers, very active leaders. What happened if these people die? No transfer, no management. Marketing is still in the hands of some individuals. Unless you can break that bottleneck, then there will be a chance. But as I'm arguing that there's only certain kind of products that is possible for the an organization of small farmers working together. Remember, organizing people to work together extremely difficult. The coordination cost is very high. Lots of cheating, going on, things like that. Yeah. It's not that easy.
You want to add something?
Yeah. Quickly on the cheating, Dr. Nippon is absolutely right. Even in a village of just 50 families, you have to be pretty draconian about the rules of engagement. I remember at the beginning of the second season, pre-harvesting, pre-cropping, we went up and basically said, look, the number of families have now expanded, so we're going to be randomly testing your soil because we're selling this product as a premium. We need to ensure that the product genuinely is a premium product. So one of the villagers said, yeah, okay, and if you find anybody who's cheated on the program, immediately we're okay. You can immediately expel him from the group. And I said, no. If I find one plot of land that is contaminated, I'm shutting down the whole program. Mm-hmm. So because I want you all to look out for each other. This is your program as a community, not just as individual contractor with us. So it is a real issue, and it becomes, I can imagine it becomes a much bigger issue if you want to do this in scale. But I actually think that this market can be created, but a lot of commitment is required. But there's some low-lying fruits to be picked. I'll give Kun Marut some good news. There are, beginning just this month, a number of schools now. Unfortunately, they're only expensive international schools for wealthy families, whose kids are going to be eating healthy food because they're buying our rice. And from our perspective, it made sense for us to approach the caterer who supplies a lot of school lunches to these schools, and it wasn't a difficult sell to ask them to communicate with the schools for them to pay a little bit extra per plate, not much, in order for their kids to be eating chemical-free rice. As I said, it wasn't an easy sell. It made me ask the question: what about these, 20,000 state schools, government-owned schools around the country? Why are there these children still eating bad rice? Why doesn't the government pay Thai farmers a little bit more for quality organic rice instead of giving them rice subsidy and rice pledge schemes and whatnot, and begin to create a market and, importantly, a taste for quality rice? Because quality rice does actually taste a lot better, and once the population becomes used to eating quality rice, they'll think twice about going back to consuming the lower quality rice. So the government can do quite a bit in creating this market, and most importantly, the government can help create a standard. Kunipon talked about all these different standards that are required for agricultural products now to be sold on supermarket shelves around the world. One thing we should note is that none of those standards are Thai. They're all international standards, and yet we're one of the biggest food exporters of the world. Food exporting is more important to us relative to our economy than it is to almost any other country in the world. But we have to follow other people's standards, and there are movements towards the creation of Thai quality assurance standards, and that's again is another area that the government can play an important role in.
I just want to kick in here before you ask the next question for you, Korn, and as well as Marut. In the last couple of years, when I've been involved in an organic farm in northern Thailand, and I know this is not just a single example, the villagers there, they grow rice, and they grow heavily pesticide, chemical-dependent rice. When this person started growing organic farm in one particular plot, the villagers started buying the rice they consume from the organic plot. They don't eat their own rice, and this is quite common apparently in around the country. So there is certainly awareness of what they are doing of the produce, and how do you bridge that gap? I mean, how do you turn all this awareness into a mass movement?
If I may,
please.
I think that's a big issue. In one of the messages that we're giving to the villagers is, look, grow the rice you want to eat, because you're absolutely right. Right now, they're selling rice cheaply and then buying back rice to eat, sometimes more expensively. Just crazy. It doesn't make sense, but that's actually what's been happening. So they should grow the rice that they want to eat. And one of the changes that is beginning to take place, and in fact it's an integral part of the 11th fifth-year plan that the NESDB comes up with every 5 years, is to promote integrated farms, to try to take Thai farmers away from monoculture, which paradoxically was something that came out of the so-called Green Revolution during the 1960s and 70s, when chemicals and fertilizers were introduced. But that is a source of problem. Although the majority of farms in Thailand still only grow one crop, that doesn't make sense. So I think the farmer of the future is someone who has an integrated farm, grows lots of different kinds of crops, livestock, fish, so that he can his family can be fed. But on top of that, he needs to think about alternative source of income as well, because I think it is a challenge in the current environment to make farming your only source of income. But at least if it is to be your only source of income, it should be something that can feed your family so that you limit the cost of having to buy foods.
Maruti, you want to kick in first, then we come to Dr. Maruti.
Yeah. I think we look at it a little bit differently. In rice, I think that the issues is that when you grow rice, you need larger land than growing vegetable. A rice farmer usually needs about 20 or 30 rice, or a big plot in order to have adequate incomes. But for vegetable farmers, they only need 2 rice, the most. If you have one family, you would need only less than 1 rice. You can do well with that. But you spray a lot more in a small plot. The problem on the rice is that people spray and it affects large piece of land. It goes into the water, and the most of the pesticide that are used is not really a pesticide; it's a herbicide. When growing rice, you can have a really good quality rice, even though you spray herbicides. Because rice is the plant that really doesn't absorb pesticide as much, because the grain is very small. The one that absorbs a lot of pesticides are the fruits and the vegetables. Okay, but people are when you talk about rice, everyone go crazy because all this country eating rice, and we want good. We think that rice is toxic, but it's really not. If you compare it to the vegetable and fruits. Yeah. But yes, everybody would eat a lot of rice. Definitely we want organic rice. But I think what we should be asking is this organic food. As Kun God said, there should be a food perspective that everything should be safe. Yeah. You spray on this field, the water flow down to another field. If they grow organic in that field, they use contaminated water. And it would take a while before the soil get cleaned up in order to grow fully organic or being certified again, because they're testing the residues in water and soil. But anyway, the earlier questions about being large field or mechanized field, I think in this region we can't do away with the mechanical help, given the problem with the labor that we're facing. And it's not only Thailand that we have less farm labor now. It's happened everywhere. In Laos, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Philippines, they were begging to have the tractor that the Thais are using to harvest or to planting, because they have a lot of problem with the labor there as well. Yeah. But their price is like 15,000 baht per ton, more than our rice here. Yeah. So given that, I think the technologies will be here to replace the needed or shortage of the labor. But how do we do it? How do we use those technology wisely and able to have a niche market on the organic products, because we are exporter of the world? I think we can do that if the government policy coming to help, building more capacity, training farmers, and better education to bring the kids back to farming. Because right now, kids are not interested because it doesn't make money. And only if we make agriculture that have a good income for kids, they will come.
Viable, yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Nippon?
Okay. How to close the gap of the information problems between producer and farmers? It's the end consumer. Is the problem is asymmetry in information, and just to spread the information is not enough. I don't think you can solve the problem by giving the information. Our problem is that in our case, the Thai government has put a lot of attention and effort on the export of safe food. We put a lot of money, put a lot of effort, but we put very little budget on enforcement of our kitchen. Our kitchen is very dirty. The Department of what do you call
Food and Drug Administration.
Food and Drug Administration in Thailand receive tiny budget comparing to the budget given to the Office of Agricultural Standards and the Department of Agriculture, who supervise the export of food, of safe products. That's one thing, enforcement problem. The second thing is what Kun Gon has been talking about. You have to build trust, consumer trust in the names, in the brand of certain products. If you can build that trust, then consumers are willing to pay, and by that time you give enough incentive for producer to produce safe food rather than produce unsafe food. And because by producing unsafe food, it's easy to sell. You don't have to depend on a kind of any company. You go to the spot market and then you sell it right away. It's very easy now. But if you want to sell brand name products, very difficult. So it's a lot of time to build the brand name, to build the trust among consumers. But the hope is there.
Yeah. Next question, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Danny Spade, DCL Books. I came here this evening to ask one question, and that was about contract farming. Over the years, I've watched contract farming from the big agri-industry companies that we all know their names, who never actually share the risk with the farmer. So if the farmer is raising chickens, the industry, the company will supply the feed, they buy the chickens afterwards, and possibly the farmer will end up with a profit, but more often than not, no, that's not true, sorry. Sometimes the farmer will end up with a loss because the chickens haven't produced enough weight and the inputs that he's paying that company for are more than what he sells the chickens for. Is that really a sign that the government should be more involved in this sort of affair where there's a big company that's dealing with the individual farmer? Maybe I could aim that question at Kun Korn and Dr. Nippon. Kun Marut, when I first came to Thailand many years ago, we still used DDT. And kids were born up in the northeast with birth defects, if we can remember that. Are we in a better position now than what we were then? And because there's not too big a queue, one last one. I'm one of those Farangs that have been here long enough. Although I'm a townie, I've probably seen more about agriculture in the northeast of Thailand than what Kun Korn has seen. And I've watched as people like Mayor Phar Luang grew coffee up in the mountains because it looked like a good cash crop, and then watched South American countries and Vietnam grow coffee, which suddenly made the beautiful coffee that we were growing up in Chiang Mai not an economic crop. Can I just finish one more?
Yeah,
when
please,
Kun Anand was speaking the other day, he avoided the question of inequality in income. Have we got to really face this question, which America and Europe are facing now? We can see people like Donald Trump and Sanders, and we can see changes in Europe where we have to tackle the question of income inequality.
Okay.
If we're looking at what's happening on the farms up in Thailand, we have to tackle this question. We still have 40% of the population working on the farms.
Okay, so that's three questions. Three questions. One is, do contract farmers, are small farmers at the mercy, basically, of large agricultural companies who go in for contract farming? Second, are we better off now than the old DDT days? And third, what about the inequality in Thailand between the farming, the agriculture, rural sector, and the urban and manufacturing sector? Who wants to go first?
I'll just give you my perhaps my small take on the question about inequality and the plight of the small farmer vis-a-vis the large companies. I think just as with every other business, ownership is critical towards making proper money. If you're an OEM manufacturer of anything, you don't make the margin, and you're at the mercy of the big company that you are supplying to. Agriculture is no different, which is why the model that I have in mind requires the farmers to take back ownership by building a link directly with the end consumer. So I go back to that. Now, obviously, it's very difficult for the individual small farmer to do that. So a degree of consolidation and a degree of cooperation is required. But I think that can be achieved. And it needs to be achieved in order for the farmer to be able to have better control of his market and his destiny. If I may, I'll give you a very small example. It's not rice. It's not, strictly speaking, agriculture, but it is, we call it agriculture. If you go down to Hua Hin, you go past what used to be a whole load of salt farms, sea salt farms. They still exist, but they're shrinking as land prices have been rising there. Well, I dropped by one of these farms a few months ago, and talk to the farmer, see how they farm the salt and so on and so forth. And I found that they were selling sun-dried natural sea salt for in 1 kilogram plastic bags for 1 baht a kilo. Okay? 1 baht a kilo, Thai sea salt. You can stop by and buy it on your way down south. So when I came back to Bangkok, I went to the supermarket. And I wanted to see how they were sold in supermarkets. Well, I found that you couldn't even buy Thai sea salt in a Thai supermarket. I could buy French, I could buy British, modern, Hawaiian, all different kinds of salt. I went to Tokyo. I did the same, surveyed their food halls at Tokyo and all that other department stores. And they have walls of sea salt from different countries around the world, none from Thailand. And they were being sold in 100 gram, 200 gram bottles for about 400, 500 baht at Din and DeLuca, which is now Thai owned. They sell 250 gram sea salt from France for 500 baht. That's equivalent to 2,000, 3,000 baht a kilo compared to one. To me, salt is salt, and sea salt is sea salt. So it's a question of knowledge, information. Access to some business support and a better ownership of your product. So that's something that we are lacking entirely. We can help educate farmers and get engaged in helping them have better access to markets right across the different kind of products. I think we can go a long way, first of all, towards making agriculture and farming profitable and thereby attract new bloods. And in doing so, help reduce the income gap that you correctly pointed out.
Do we increase subsidies to rice and rubber in order to make the inequality less?
Well, frankly speaking, in the short term, some form of subsidy is almost certainly still required. But that cannot be a long-term solution.
The
And
government at the moment doesn't believe that it's needed, right?
Well, they're subsidizing too in different ways. As Dr. Nippon says, every government does in different ways. And but there needs to be a better way of spending that money. And of course, the shocking data that Dr. Nippon pointed out was the relative money that is spent in agricultural R&D as opposed to and creation of markets as compared to the subsidies. Now, the good news is I made a point of visiting. I asked the question to myself, does R&D exist? I'm new to this, so I didn't know the answer. So I looked up and I found that the Ministry of Agriculture does have R&D center in every province. So I decided to visit a couple of them. They were good. They have very small budget. I mean, shamefully small budget. So much so that when they gave me lunch, I felt guilty. But they were good, dedicated, passionate. One of the 10,000 that still goes to the agricultural colleges.
But no future, no budget.
No future. And
let's just hear the answers first.
Yeah.
You can approach the speakers later.
But I said it's encouraging because first of all, the infrastructure is there. What I want to know from a policy perspective was if I wanted to, because I sense the same with Dr. Nippon that we need a bit of R&D here in our agriculture. So I want to know from a policy perspective whether the infrastructure exists for me to pump the money in, when we back in government, and if the infrastructure already existed, then it would be easier for us to take that step. And I was really happy to find that yes, it does exist. The people exist, but what was missing, that was really obvious also, was any connectivity between what they were doing in these centers and the farmers. Now, the farmers in the particular village that I was working with is only 20 kilometers away from that particular Mahasarakam R&D center. They'd never even heard of the existence of this center. And this center was doing great work about drip irrigation, the innovative ways of making organic fertilizers. These are all know-hows that would be extremely valuable to all the farmers in this particular village. They didn't even know that this center exists. So lack of connectivity and lack of leverage, even against the small budget that is currently being allocated.
Okay, Marut, could you just speak very briefly to the question on DDT? Has DDT merely been replaced by equally or even more dangerous chemicals like endosulfans and paraquat? Very briefly, please, because we got questions waiting.
DDT is banned since the 70s, and I think we stopped it. I mean, I grew up with DDTs with my parents.
Can you speak a little closer to the mic?
Yeah. It's banned, but I read a recent study by the Chiang Mai University that traced the residues. It still remain in the ground, and the children and the farmers who grew vegetable and the chicken and whatnot still has the trace of DDT in there because it's one of the organic pollutant. Yeah. That will not persistent organic pollutant that doesn't go away. It's there. It's like the lead and the mercury that is being banned in around the world. But yeah, there are other insecticides that has been replaced. Some of them, cypermethrin is also one of the dangerous one that's spraying in the villages given by the Ministry of Health. But they didn't say any effects to health. I mean, they didn't give any information of giving the awareness to the users. So yeah, I mean, we're still living with some of the toxic one, but not as bad as the DDT. That's fade out in the stocks.
Dr. Nippon?
Yeah, may I give a comment to two questions? First, on inequality, sectoral income between agriculture and non-agriculture. I'll give you an observation. It takes the U.S. 100 years to close the gap of time. a long period of transformation. Of course, and now we know we should not spend 100 years for Thailand. It should be less than 100 years, and it takes 100 years to move, most of the labor out of agriculture. Until in US you have 1% of farmers, like things like that. If we have 10% of farmers and 10% of our income from agricultural sector, then income per capita will be equalized. Therefore, it's a long transformation process, and I think that is necessary. That's a road we have to go. No other way. Increasing labor productivity, that's very important. Okay. On second issues on unfair contract. The contract farming, the objective of the contract farming is to reduce price risk for farmers. Be careful when they blame big companies. They said, the farmers have to bear all kind of risks. It is a myth. The truth is that the contract has to, ensure price risk for farmers. Otherwise, farmer will not accept the contract. Most of the output risk is borne by the contract, by the contractee, the farmers. The problem is this. Nowadays, because of rapid change in technology or because of bird flu disease, require that you have to reinvest constantly in your farm structure, and it's a heavy investment, and the investment is completely borne by contractee, by the farmers, and contractors do not bear any part of that kind of investment risk. Therefore, if you invest in that structure a few 10 million baht, and then in the next couple of years you have to reinvest again, so you become slave forever with the company. That's the problem at the moment. The problem with CP, Jaren Pokapan, is actually, it's at the beginning, in early years, they have the problem because unfair contract, and then believe it or not, the company seized the copy of the contracts of the farmers' contract. The company did not give the copy of the contract to the farmers. But now the company is quite a very small number of contractees under direct contract with CP. Most of the contractees have contact with the feed wholesalers who become contractor instead of CP, and there are a large number of these feed wholesalers who are very unfair to the farmers. Now CP is forced by by society to change their contract. I don't believe in law. Having law is not as good as having a strong social pressure. Because of the social pressure, CP is now revising the contract. I have the new contracts on my table, but haven't had time to read it yet. It's about this thing.
Okay. Next question, please. Please. Go to next question.
Yeah, thank you, Nirmal. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Imtiaz Maqbul. I'm the executive editor of Travel Impact Newswire. I cover the travel and tourism industry in Thailand and the Asia Pacific region. Khun Korn, my question to you is how can the agriculture sector and the travel and tourism sector enhance what is actually a natural partnership in terms of all the causes that you're looking at, whether it's organic issues, whether it's promoting the health and wellness, the move against pesticides. I'd be very keen to explore what ideas you would have to allow the travel and tourism sector, now 30 million visitors a year, to ally itself with the causes that many of you are propagating. The second question is related to the fact that it seems that all around Thailand today, the country seems to be learning that it has paid the price of ignoring the king's His Majesty the King's sufficiency economy. As part of this revival of old traditions and back to basics philosophies, what role for the sufficiency economy in the new national development plan, and particularly in also taking forward some of these causes, and really what price it has paid in terms of ignoring the principles over the last 20, 30 years?
Let me take the first question.
Take the second one.
Okay, let me take the first question.